And that only led to his frustration. Kalki could see Bala was growing impatient. He was furious, his throat convulsing with anger. He yelled loudly in anger and charged once again at the quick Kumbh. And yet again he dodged. Kalki looked at Durukti and then at Martanja. They were enjoying this. No, he's tiring him out. And before he could spill the secret to Bala, the 6 feet 9-inch guardsman rushed to hit Kumbh, who just slyly sidestepped the attack, gave a somersault in the air and came over Bala's shoulder. With one of his hands, he grabbed his neck and the other grabbed the weapon. He didn't kill Bala instantly. Rather, he pushed himself down, letting Bala collapse as well, due to the combined weight. Bala tripped, and as he did, Kumbh pushed himself away from the big man and rolled back. Kumbh came forward, while Bala was trying to regain his footing, somersaulting again, and letting his javelin pierce Bala's chest. Except he couldn't. The astonished eyes of Kumbh looked up at what stopped his javelin so fast. Holding his javelin was none other than Kalki, his fist clenching around the iron rod, almost twisting the spear at the end with brute force. A trickle of blood dripped over Bala, who was in shock of what had happened. Kumbh had a dumbfounded expression. He was weak, almost shuddering. Kalki began to clench the javelin tighter, and the blade just broke in one piece. He grabbed the end of the javelin, and with tremendous force, he plunged the javelin's weak end against Kumbh's chest. He fell back just like how Bala had collapsed a while back. Kalki came forward, tossing the javelin on the side and grabbing hold of Kumbh as he began to drag him against the muddy ground, choking him. Kalki rained a few punches over his gut. Bleeding from his nose and mouth, Kumbh had lost his earlier frenzied look of vitality. He was weak and timid. Kalki looked at Martanja and Durukti, who were watching him intently, mortified, but also awed by the grand sight of what Kalki was able to do to their best warrior. And then Kalki let go of his throat. Kumbh's body just fell on the ground. The very fact that he was able to surprise Kumbh was what gave him leverage on the quick warrior. Kumbh was on the ground, and Kalki watched him with narrowed eyes. He had a bloody nose, that Rakshas. Kalki looked up, wiping the blood from his palm, tearing a piece of his tunic, and wrapping it around his palm as he looked up at the disappointed Durukti. Bala came on to his feet, grabbing Kalki's face. He was shivering, and for someone who knew Bala, it was a surprise. Perhaps the fact that he was so close to death made him realize the finiteness of life. "We have won," Kalki calmly said. Martanja just watched Kumbh as if he couldn't believe his best warrior had been knocked down by a village simpleton. But he didn't know Kalki was more than just that. "You have to leave now," he ordered, and he began to move away when he heard the same gentle voice. "You were never part of the fight." "Well, what do you know? I was the surprise element in the fight." A flash of anger swept across Durukti's face. "You want to play it like this?" Kalki turned to face the sister of Kali and nodded. "All right then." Durukti looked at Martanja. "Grab the boy and raid the village." Kalki's body stiffened before he realized that 10 Rakshas came to his side. He looked at Bala and signaled at him to rush off with the guards he had brought. Bala did so, while Kalki tried to get rid of as many Rakshas as possible. Some of them even chased Bala, but he was quick enough to escape deep in the woods. They didn't kill Kalki, so he punched a few before his arms were trapped and his legs were tightly bound together. Kalki was forced into a strap. As he looked up in the sky, he could see his father's image in it for a while. As he was bound and taken forward, his back being flayed by the continuous lashes from their whips, he was forcibly made to kneel before Durukti. He couldn't hear or see Bala anywhere, and he only wished they would fight valiantly. "You betrayed the agreement. I played the way you played." Durukti smiled, the ingenuousness and deviousness clearly visible in her. "Don't kill him," she told the Rakshas who were holding Kalki. Martanja was surprised. "Why, my lady? A peasant who needs 10 of your men to be tamed?" Durukti narrowed her eyes, piercingly glaring at Kalki, who was held against his will by many arms, cannot be just a mere peasant. Kalki looked up, straining his arms against the back. He could see the village folks had brought the boulders on the opposite side, above the battle site. Now, Kalki yelled. Durupti and Martanja yelled at the incoming surprise as the villagers pushed the rock and escaped from there. The boulders rolled down against the terrain, smacking each other as well as the Rakshas and their tents, destroying their food and shields. While it did not cause any significant casualty, but it did raise the temper of Martanja, who by now was seething in rage. Take this imbecile to the cage and attack each and every house, raid it and find the caves. Kalki, while being dragged away, could only think about one thing. Has Lakshmi returned to the secure place? Arjun had seen little as to what had happened. The archers had strung their bows, and they were waiting for his command. Even now, he could see from far the western end where Roshan Mitra was waiting with his own set of archers. Kripa was on that side too, hiding behind a rock. Nothing had happened. And then in the midst of the green, hot plain, he was able to see someone running. His eyes terrified, his mouth agape. It was someone big, large, Bala. The thought crossed his mind, but it was idiotic to think that a person like Bala would be running from the war. No, it was indeed Bala. He was coming towards them. Hold your fire. Kripa said what Arjun wanted to say. As he came forward, away from the bushes that concealed him, he saw two guards running behind Bala, and just yards away from them were Rakshas. They weren't sprinting like ordinary beings, but were fighting the breeze, as if trying to tackle it. They lurched on the guards with their axes and chopped their heads off. They reached for Bala, but before that Kripa ordered the volley of arrows. The two Rakshas were hit by the arrows. Bala staggered past the line of archers that were meters from Arjun and Kripa. He grabbed for the leaves and the grass, panting restlessly, demanding water that Arjun rushed to get. There were 5 pots filled with fresh water from the lake that they had planned to use when the archers would get tired. Arjun helped Bala as he began to quench his thirst. Once done, he said, "They are coming. It's over. They got. He was having a hard time breathing. They got Kalki." Kripa exchanged a worried glance with Arjun. "We need to get him, mate," Kripa urgently bade Arjun. "Who won the combat?" Bala looked down. "He had lost. We did. Kalki saved me from getting killed." He was on the verge of tears, but Arjun saw more than just the sadness. He saw disappointment. The fighter, he was so small. "I should have been able to." Kripa knelt down and grabbed him by the tunic. "Now listen, fat man. Get this in your thick head." He had a rather blunt way of speaking now, which one would not very easily reconcile with his usual drunken swagger. "We are about to die, so I don't need your weeping. I need your bronze." But he was so small. Kripa sighed. "Never underestimate your enemy. Size, big or small, doesn't matter if the other knows what the pressure points are." And that was when they heard the roars. Kripa came forward, while Arjun saw what he couldn't believe. Like bees swarming around a hive, it was Rakshas all over the place. They had entered with axes, swords, spears and javelins. Arjun ran for cover as he grabbed a bow from his quiver and shot an arrow, hitting a Rakshas who was sprinting towards him. And just like that, Arjun saw they had even taken control of the huts along Roshan Mitra's side. Some were even moving towards Leela's group, where most of the guards had been stationed. Perhaps she would be able to stop them. Perhaps. That was when the Rakshas entered his territory. A group of people at the back of the archers began to use the bolas. They tossed it towards the Rakshas. Initially caught unawares, soon they paid no heed to the small explosions. The archers shot the arrows, but most of them just dodged them. The ones who got hit were hit on their necks or in their foreheads, just knocking them down on the spot. The surviving Rakshas just lurched from their positions, grabbing the bows, and stabbed the archers. They even managed to cut them deep, ripping their torsos apart. Seeing all the people he had lived his entire life with being killed like this, Arjun couldn't believe his eyes at what was happening. The volunteers fought hard, some even managed to kill, but most of the time they were beaten and became victims of the wrath that was the Rakshas. Arjun saw Bala, who was hiding behind the tree. Finding his foothold on the path, he raced to him and grabbed him by the waist. What are you doing? Help us. Fight. He shot another arrow that instantly pierced a Raksha's head. I don't know. I don't know if I will be able to. I'm not strong. I lost. Bala's pupils were dilated in mute fear. Strength doesn't mean you win every time. It also means to stand up again when you fall down once. And at that time, the Rakshas had come forward. Arjun pulled back the string after fitting the bow, when he was grabbed by the Rakshas and thrown to the side. It went on to attack Bala, who could have easily attacked him back, but he just let him kick and choke him. Arjun saw no hope in Bala anymore, but he did see something fascinating in Kripa, who had a sword in his hand, just plunging it deep inside the Rakshas who had attacked Bala. Fat man, get us where we can get to Kalki. We will all die, said the wimpy Bala. The Rakshas had managed to ravage most of the archers, but there were 3 of them still alive, ready to pounce at Arjun now. He was out of bows. Kripa held out the swords in front of him. The 3 Rakshas grinned in unison, as if linked. One of them went for Arjun, and that was when he felt helpless as the Rakshas jumped on him and began to attack him. With each plunge of the axe that was directed towards his head, Arjun tried to dodge as best as he could. He used his knee and hit the Rakshas between his knees. Scavenging for his fallen bow, he staggered over the grass and smacked the bow across the Rakshas, which did not really yield the effect he desired. He lunged, his blade glimmering in the sunlight, when a big figure rammed against it. Arjun realized it was none other than Bala, who was over the Rakshas and had his make pummeling the hapless and bewildered Rakshas. Bala then casually, with blood sprayed all over his chest and face, walked to the Rakshas who was leering at Kripa. Arjun realized the third Rakshas, who had attacked Bala, was already ripped in half, as if Bala had broken a piece from a loaf of bread. When the Rakshas who was attacking Kripa saw what happened to his friends, he backed off, leaning against the tree in fear. Bala came forward, thumping his make over his palm as if waiting to smack the man instantly. And he was about to do that, Kripa stopped him. We need to know more about the camp. The Rakshas just blinked. Honestly, I have no idea about the camp. His accent was thick. You can kill him. Kripa shrugged, wiping the blood from his face. Bala began the massive pounding session once again, when Arjun stopped him. Can you stop scaring me? The Rakshas pleaded, almost falling over the ground and begging. It was funny since he was trying to be dominating earlier. Just kill me if you have to. Don't put me on the verge of. His voice trailed off and he began speaking rapidly in his native tongue. Kripa pulled him back up. Frightened, the Rakshas asked, what do you want, you all? How many men are in the camp? 1 too many. That's not a number. Don't run your smart mouth. Not now especially. Bala thumped the tree, and it shook. Surprising as it was, Arjun was happy that Bala had returned. For a moment there, he had forgotten who he was and what he was like. He had been different, so uniquely distinguished, that Arjun realized how real death encounters really make the strongest person falter. Bala was a great personality, someone who everyone would look at and fear, but here he had been, just crying to himself. Battles do so many things to an individual, one of them being crushing their soul. Though he was back, perhaps from a sense of duty to save his friends, or perhaps Arjun's words might have just worked. Around A100. All right, Kripa said. What are the exact points of the camp? Kripa began to make a rough sketch, with a twig over the little sandy area on the ground. He made a rectangle and inside it, he made circles that represented tents and stars that represented the Rakshas. Now tell me clearly, mate. Who are there and how are they placed? I will die, he coughed. If they find out I revealed it. And what do you think we will do to you if you don't tell us? Kripa signaled at the back where dead Rakshas lay. By the gods, Arjun couldn't believe he was in the midst of an adventure he was not ready for. He couldn't feel anything except dreadful fear and surging adrenaline in equal measures. Rather, he didn't want to feel. He was hoping to get out of this entire duel with his calm rationality and practicality. If they went about the whole scheme of things systematically, then it would not be long until they could roast these outcasts. All right, all right. The Rakshas nodded glumly as he knelt down and began to explain the entire camp to Kripa. Your friend could be placed here, in the cage where we have kept the mules and the horses. This is our employer's tent. Durukti? Yes, that damn woman, the Rakshas cursed. Because of her, I'm stuck here. It's close to the cage, the employer's tent. Kripa nodded. That means heightened security. How many are left behind in the camp? Perhaps 20, most probably, just to make sure nothing goes wrong. Kripa didn't like the idea. You can do what you want to with him now, mate. He tapped Bala's shoulder. The Rakshas began to plead again, like the way he was doing earlier, with his palms flat, his mouth contorted into a helpless plea, before Bala used his make and just hit him hard on the head, knocking him out. What should we do? Arjun stepped forward, addressing the old guru. We need to escape. Kripa looked at Bala and Arjun at the same time. Get your brother out of here and just leave. What about Shambhala? Kripa squared in front of Arjun, tightening his clutches over his shoulder. Shambhala is just one part of the world, and to save the world, we need to sacrifice a small part of it. See the bigger picture. What do you mean? Your brother is more than who he thinks he is, Kripa revealed, and I will explain to you both how important it is for us to save him, more than many people out here. He can't die because if he does, oh well, it'll not just be Shambhala that'll be devoured by the destruction. Entire Illavarti will be up in flames. Arjun could understand the gravity of the situation, but he also couldn't believe his brother was someone who would save the world. He was a simpleton after all. All right, lead us on, Arjun nodded. Kripa began to enter the forest, followed by the silent Bala and Arjun, when Arjun revealed something going on in his mind. Hold on, we are going inside the enemy lines, and we don't even know if we will escape. What if we die? Studying the scenery, Kripa scratched his head. Oh well, I haven't figured that part in this entire rescuing mission. And he sniggered. God, I hate that laugh, Arjun thought. But he continued to follow him. It was horrible, sitting in the stench of horse shit, seeing the Rakshas swinging from one place to another. He had been trapped in a cage that could easily include a dozen more. He had enough space, and yet he could not breathe. It wasn't like Kalki didn't try to open the cage. With all his might, he tried to push it apart, punch it, and even pull the bars apart, but nothing happened. Perhaps it was the way the metal had been made, or perhaps he had weakened. With his tongue out to quench his dry mouth, he let the wine touch him. Kalki saw the camp from inside, and it was more organized than had been perceivable earlier. There were a lot of weapons in one tent, from where each Rakshas would go and get one. There were some bigger tents, perhaps to house Durukti and Martanja. There were pots filled with water and surus, while fire pits were made for logs to be stacked up on. He couldn't hear anything but wails and yells from either side. But he couldn't distinguish which were from his people and which were from the Rakshas. Who must one sympathize with when you can't even hear the truth? Kalki felt restless as he walked back and began to punch the cage. It rattled, but it didn't break. He continued to punch until his knuckles bled, and he felt the hurt stinging his arms, almost temporarily leaving them numb. He had nothing on him to cover his wound, and that would only make it septic. Anger is good, a voice came from the back. But never use it against yourself. Kalki turned to see Durukti, with her lady companion on her side. In the midst of the ultimate humdrum and the loud clans of the weapons, Durukti remained calm as if she knew she would win this battle. I'm sure this didn't go as you thought it would. Durukti simply nodded. I would agree with you on that. She paused. It was a brave little attempt from a village like Shambhala. But you must all realize that you are facing trained men. They are Tiarvanbialis. Kalki wiped the blood over his dhoti. They are as trained as us. Just because they are called Tiarvanbialis doesn't make them uncivilized. You have not seen the world as much as I have. I have traveled all around, and I can say one thing.